G'day punters again, just another follow-up to the boost fluctuation video I put on some time ago. Just to let you know where that is sitting at the moment. Since that video was taken, I've travelled from where I'm located in the Wide Bay, Burnett, Queensland. I travelled all the way down the east coast to Melbourne, to Bendigo, across to Renmark, Adelaide, back to Melbourne, and back to where I am now. I've also done a couple of trips up to Yeppoon, north of Rockhampton, and down to Brisbane and back as well. So I've knocked up a few kilometres on the big trip down to South Australia. I had continuing problems with boost. I even stopped in at Berrima Diesel and had a chat to Andrew there on the way down. I discovered when I was in northern New South Wales that this little valve here, which is, I think Toyota call it an electronic vacuum control solenoid, or a boost control valve, I would call it as a layperson, was broken. This little filter housing here was found down the valley. That necessitated my trip down to Melbourne to get a replacement for about $445. Ordinarily it would sit below the top mount intercooler, so you can guess as well as I can how that got broken. I can only assume that perhaps it got broken when the top mount was taken off. Anyhow, when I replaced that, that still didn't resolve the boost fluctuation issue, nor the loss of boost, but investigations into the vacuum circuit were that these engines on the 79 series have a closed vacuum circuit, which makes sense in here. It operates the vacuum booster for brakes, which I don't have anymore, but there's still a vacuum tank down here. Just see my hand down there. There's a vacuum tank down there. It's been plugged off. It has two sensors in it. And I believe that's why I was getting the C1425 brake error code, because it was losing vacuum, and that triggered that sensor and the error code came up. The circuit goes from there to the vacuum pump and engine, which is up the front of the motor down there. And there's a T-piece in here which goes to the boost control valve. The other side of that goes down to the boost actuator on the turbo. So my line of thinking was, if I've lost vacuum, the actuator would shut down. I think there's no load and zero boost output. That was my line of thinking anyhow. When I got down to Bendigo, I had a closer look, and with my son-in-law, we pulled off the single mount entry. That's it there. That was part of the PDI installation. And the reason I did that is because between the mount housing and the manifold, when at idle, there was oil leaks around here and on the other side, and I could see air bubbles coming out. So there was a poor seal there. I did buy some gasket material and some Loctite 515, intending to fabricate a new gasket, but when I pulled the gasket off, it was a metal one. So we cleaned up the fittings and the housing and the manifold. Got some 515, applied it to both sides of that metal gasket. It seemed like it was in good condition, and reinstalled it. I did also find that the two front mounting nuts were loose and the four back mounting bolts were reasonably tight. Did that fix the problem? No, it didn't. I still had air leaks, or oil leaks more importantly, on this side of the single entry to the manifold, and had oil pooling around the glow plugs because of that oil leak. I booked the vehicle back into the mechanic shop that installed the PDI front mount and gave them all the data that I had. And from what I understand, they took off the single entry and they either machined it or filed it so that it was level, and reinstalled it. Since then, there haven't been any oil leaks. That was back in November. On a trip after that down to Brisbane, unloaded, just cruising at 110 on the freeway. Off cruise control, I lost boost again. That's the only time it's happened again since. I've recently had this back in again to them, and from what I understand, they adjusted their tune settings, and I haven't had any problems since, knock on wood. So in short, I think the boost fluctuation problems were a combination of those boost gauge hose issues, the poor fitting between the single entry and the manifold, and perhaps to a small degree the boost control valve as well, perhaps, probably less so. I have noticed that, and if you look at the earlier video, I pointed out that this fitting here went to the boost control valve. Well, after this last play by the mechanic shop, that hose there now goes to the map sensor, and you can see just a little air filter down in there, and that goes up to the back here to a sensor, whereas previously that fitting at the top was connected to the boost control valve. I'm not sure how that would make any difference, but that's the way they've plumbed it now. So hopefully it's all resolved. I've got about a month or so now before I disappear for about 3 months, then come back in May and go for that elusive lap around the block, and we'll see how it goes. That's all on this follow-up to those boost fluctuation problems. Hooroo.